My name is Dr. Tegan Bristow. I work at the Digital Arts Department of the Wits School of Arts at the University of Witwatersrand. And I work at the intersection of art, science and technology. And when we talk about the intersection of art, science and technology, we look at the practice of art within a technological space. So for instance, animation or gaming or virtual reality. But sometimes we look at the intersection of art and science. So how, for instance, do we think about art as a research encounter, and how can science benefit from art? Yeah, it's very interesting actually, because often we in the creative field think about ourselves also quite broadly within the humanities, which are sort of academically separate from the sciences and technology. And the humanities include language, they include social sciences, so psychology, engagement in different kinds of ways with people, communities, the creative arts. So, I mean, we're film, we're music, we're, all kinds of creative work. And one of the things that I found in my interaction with scientists and with technologists is that the methods that we employ are very different. So in the arts, we engage quite a lot personally. We engage on who the human is in that regard. So one of the things that I'd really love to see is a meeting of methods for the people in the sciences and technology to be a little bit more open to humanities' methodologies and methods of how we understand and how we engage. And also I think for an openness from the creative community to the sciences. I mean, I'm a geek. I like science and I like technology, and there's so much value in being able to look at something from a data perspective, even though our methodologies are very human orientated. So the meeting of those methods for me is fundamental. Yeah. So I was born in a really, really small town in Limpopo called Makado. It used to be called Luchihard. And I went to primary school there in what they used to call a dual medium school, so half English, half Afrikaans. And I didn't think I needed to be an artist when I was really little, but when I went to high school, I became completely fascinated with art, much to my mother's distress. She obviously wanted me to be a scientist or something that was more technical than someone who'd be at home painting all day long. So she tried very, very hard for me not to be an artist, and made sure that I got lots of maths in, which I was very good at, and lots of science in, which I was also very good at. But my desire to become an artist was like really strong, and she had to give up eventually. And I went to Rhodes University, and at the time Rhodes University focused a lot on painting. So I went into the painting school, which was incredibly luxurious and some of the happiest times of my life. All we did every morning is paint. You woke up, look at colors, look at brush strokes, painted and made work. And one day, one fateful day, I went to the wrong class. So I was meant to go to like a history of art class super early in the morning, and I walked by mistake into a computer science 101 class. And they were basically presenting games that they'd made. And you've got to remember, this is early days of computing. I think my group of students at Rhodes were like one of the first groups to use the internet. So I sat in this class and watched these kids present games that they'd made, like really, really simple, two-dimensional games, things jumping over other things. And they were so excited about what they were presenting because they had used their computer science skills to make a game. And I was completely blown away. I had never seen anything like this in my life before. I knew like in that instant that I wanted to learn how to code. From there, went and did a second degree at UNISA that had computer science in it. I did it for 2 years and learned a lot about computer science and learned a lot about coding. But came back to South Africa 2 years later and realized that I didn't actually have that time. And I signed up for a master's degree at WITS, and the master's at WITS had just opened. It was like one of the first master degrees in what we called back then interactive digital media, and another one that was in animation, and I went for the interactive digital media one. And I did that for a year and a half, and we really did everything from coding to sound design to building interactive websites to building interactive forms of art. My favorite was actually building interactive installations. So literally in a museum or in an art gallery, putting sensors, using things like the Xbox Kinect, which is an infrared sensor that picks up body tracking, to basically change shapes and things on a computer screen, like on big screens. So we did a lot of that, and it was just mind-blowing to really bring my 4 or 5 years of learning how to paint and work with color and form and image, and then bring that into a very live, interactive way where people could interact with the artworks using their bodies or using the sound of their voice. The department really liked the work that I was doing and hired me to run the same masters. So I was very young and teaching sometimes people that were older than me, but I loved the practice so much that it was something very extraordinary for me to do. Yeah, and I worked running that lab, so we called it the Interactive Media Lab, and I would bring my Interactive Media MA class together with the Electrical Engineering class, together with the music class from the Wits School of Arts, because the Digital Arts department was still in the School of Arts, and we made some really mad stuff. And it was from that point that I began to understand, not only in my own practice, but how we can interact with different fields. So for an artist to work with an engineer, for an engineer to work with a musician, what does that mean? How does that work? And a lot of our work in the department currently is very much about that. It's about meeting fields, having connections with the computer science department, with the electrical engineering department. Yeah, it's very interesting. And when I began, there were very few girls in the space, actually. Obviously, a lot more girls in the creative space, but not so much in the engineering space. And some of my very first students were from the engineering degrees, and they were like the only girl in that whole 4 years of engineering degree. And this has dramatically changed. We are seeing a lot more girls in the space. And what's exciting is that you don't have to be just that engineering girl. You can also be a creative, technical girl to enter that space, make games, make animations, build the next metaverse, essentially. So one of the projects that I started working on a few years ago is something that we call Vernacular Algorithms. So it's a difficult thing to describe, but basically we were working with the Wits Art Museum, which is a university museum, and they have a beautiful collection of Zulu beadwork, basketry from Mozambique, really gorgeous stuff that's made traditionally in African cultures, Southern African cultures. And at the time we were engaging with a woman called Lindewe Matlali, who was working on a way to teach mathematics and coding through knitting. And there's a theorist called Ron Eglash. He's in America. He's an ethno-mathematician. So this is a kind of person who looks at maths from the perspective of culture. And he'd written a beautiful book called African Fractals. And it basically showed how a lot of traditional art, from beadwork, basketry, even architecture actually, had fractal mathematics embedded in how it was. Your grandmother, if you went and spent some close time with her and she was doing knitting or she was making beadwork or basketry, is actually very mathematical in her approach. So how do we bring that into our classrooms? How do we teach coding from that perspective? In 2014, a long time ago, the Digital Arts Department at Wits School of Arts started a collaboration with the Tshimologong Innovation Precinct, which lucky for us is literally just 2 walking blocks away from us. So the School of Arts campus at Wits is right at the bottom of campus, pretty much inside of Braamfontein. And the Tshimologong Precinct was a kind of public-facing innovation precinct. So it was a way for us to bring the question of what is digital art actually to the public. And Fak'ugesi Festival was this festival, and we could bring animators, game designers, all different kinds of people making beautiful things with technology into a festival. And in this way we could basically start talking about what digital art is in a very public way, and for free inviting people to come and visit and have fun and engage, but also supporting digital artists that are making work in the country, because it's not well known. And when we started out, we were doing so many different kinds of things. I mean, we started with the concept of digital art itself. Is that making beautiful images in Photoshop? Is it about coding a beautiful website? Is it about photo painting things by yourself? We even worked with the makerspaces. So we did a lot of work with the different makerspaces around the country that were doing 3D printing, that were doing IoT. One year we even made drawing robots, so little robots that would draw, 2 different kinds of ones, and we had like a big public event where anyone from the street could come in and like learn how to make a little robot that can draw. Not so long ago we started doing a lot of work with augmented reality and actually working between computer scientists and poets. So we and graphic artists, so graphic designers, poets, and computer scientists to basically build AR apps that from a graphical image, like a beautiful graphical image, say now of someone like standing in a field. When you did the AR work over them, it would like transform into like this magical thing flying through the air, and it would also like trigger a poem that was specifically written for that augmented reality piece. In a lot of ways I have 2 lives. One life is my festival life and my curatorial life where I work with amazing artists across the whole world. And my other life is my teaching life, and I try and bring those 2 things together a lot. So for instance, right now I'm working on a project between artificial intelligence and art, and we're working with between 20 and 30 artists on the continent. So it's about setting up studio visits actually, so remote studio visits where we call them in, we talk about their work, we look at what they're looking at. We're trying to help them build out an understanding of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we would help them bring technologists in there and help them build slowly over a few months a proposal for new work and see where they can be technically supported. So a lot of my work is engaging with artists, looking at their work. It's really fun, it's really nice. Then my teaching work is very much about engaging with students in a very similar way. Yeah, so it's a mix of technical work, creative work. I really like working with students in smaller groups to really look closely at stuff. So this morning I was just planning a site visit to the museum. So we'll be taking some of the digital art and engineering students to the art museum. Some of them will be going to the art museum for the very first time. So this is also really exciting to kind of think about what they might see, how they might see it, and then to kind of interpret what they're seeing through the perspective of engineering and mathematics. Yeah, my advice is to always be curious. Like constantly learning is pretty much what you'll do with technology. Technology changes on like a 3-monthly basis at the moment. What I was teaching and learning in my master's is not even relevant now. And year to year, we look at new technologies, new things. So it's important to learn how to learn, not actual knowledge and actual facts. It's about being curious, it's about unpacking, it's about evolving and seeing as the world changes and being part of that change. That's really important. Yeah, and I think follow your passion. It sounds like a weird thing to say follow your passion because everybody says that, right? But to follow the passion is that tiny little thing inside of you that is curious, that wants to know more about one or other thing. And that will lead you. Like myself, I was always interested in art, but I kind of had a bent for mathematics as well. So I kept those 2 things with me, even though my mum helped me a little bit with that. It's about kind of retaining what you're interested in and not letting people tell you that you can't be interested in this or can't be interested in that. You are interested, and that curiosity is your ticket, essentially.